This is episode 21 with Chuck Longanecker. Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And today we have an opportunity to sit down with Chuck Longanecker. And if you don't know that name, if it doesn't quite sound familiar to you yet, well, he is the founder and CEO of Digital Telepathy. And if you've been paying attention to a lot of the rising stars in the entrepreneurial space over the last couple of years, you might have noticed that Digital Telepathy is the design company that most of them have been using to design their websites. Guys like Lewis Howes, Tim Ferris, Neil Patel of Crazy Egg, and Dave Asprey of BulletProof Coffee. So if you are a self-made entrepreneur or if you aspire to be one, today's episode is absolutely filled with some incredibly valuable words of wisdom when it comes to website design first and foremost, but also to scaling and growing your company, because we are essentially going to go inside the story and the growth of Digital Telepathy. So with that being said, please welcome Chuck Longanecker. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we have the privilege of speaking to the founder of Digital Telepathy, Mr. Chuck Longanecker. So, Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be here.
Absolutely, my friend. This is a really cool opportunity, first and foremost, because I've had a chance to work with you guys a couple of years ago on some of my properties, and we're going to be working with you here. You don't know that yet, on a brand new project that I have coming up in the first quarter of next year, which I'm super excited about. But I wanted to have you on the show because I think you have an absolutely amazing story as an entrepreneur, and because, you know, as the founder and owner of Digital Telepathy, which is, from what I perceive and what I've seen, I'd say the top go-to firm for high-end web design for entrepreneurs like myself, for Lewis Howes or Tim Ferris, and a handful of others. It's a great opportunity for you to come on and really share your experience with the folks who are listening to this today on how to create an amazing website for their business. And there's a lot to that. It's a very broad phrase and term, but this is a chance to really dive into that process. So thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Excited to jump into it and excited to work with you again.
So you have quite an extensive background as an entrepreneur. You've had a couple of businesses that you founded, a couple of, at least one exit that I'm aware of as well. But there's not a lot of folks who know your story and how you got to be where you are today. So if you wouldn't mind spending 10 to 15 minutes bringing people up to speed, on how you became a self-made man, essentially, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm very proud to be a bootstrapper and kind of come from nothing. And I think I'm still trying to get there. But at the same time, if you think of the new rich and what Tim says in his 4-hour work week, the fact that we don't have to be incredibly wealthy to be successful. We just have to do what we love to do. And I get to do that every day. And one of the reasons I'm not out there in the mainstream very often is because I focus a lot on our culture. And I spend a lot of our time trying to train and lead the rest of the people in our company to be able to follow my footsteps and kind of raise them up, because that's really like doubling, tripling, quadrupling your stock when you have other mini me's out there or people that actually even better than you doing what you do. So I'd be happy to talk a little bit about where I came from and kind of the journey so far with DT.
That'd be great. Where did you get your start?
So, funny story. I started in college. My first company I started when I was 20 in college. I've never been very employable. I've always actually been, strangely enough, somewhat of a slacker when I work for someone else. I think I have an extremely lazy person inside of me that I've pummeled into submission by being an entrepreneur. But that laziness definitely came out in other jobs, and I never really knew why, because I was a good athlete. And I think I started to realize that just my heart wasn't in it. And it kind of felt like it was a necessary evil that you had to do to just get by in life. And so when I was 20, I started a business with my now partner in DT, Arnold Yoon. And we worked in tech support for the whole University of Wisconsin. And we decided if we just showed up at their house, it'd be way easier and it'd actually be a lot more profitable. So we went from $4 an hour supporting people up to $25 an hour in the 90s in college, and created a nice little business for ourselves. and established kind of our initial philosophy on business and on life and how they're kind of integrated. And also, as opposed to us always just saving and packing the money away, we spent it and had fun with it and enjoyed our life and maximized everything we possibly could, which is still pretty true to today. But after we graduated, we thought we should probably be responsible new adults, and we both started working for big organizations. Arnold went and worked for Abbott Laboratories, and I worked for Arthur Andersen, which many of you may know did not last very long after the Enron scandal. So after that, I went and I worked for a few startups as a sales engineer. Again, found that I really was not very employable. And I always got along. I always figured a way to get through a lot of business, much like I did in school without going to class. But when I was 25, I decided, I'm kind of tired of this working for other people thing. I got laid off, had a $5,000 severance, and decided to start DT in 2001, almost 15 years ago. So I stretched that $5,000 severance for about 6 months somehow and refused to get on unemployment as motivation to figure out a way to make it work. And I was lucky enough to have my dad hire me for my first job. And I brought a friend in at the time who was actually a way better designer and developer than me, Bill Bonifil. And he ended up being my first business partner in DT. And it started in my bedroom in Chicago. Had no idea what we were doing, but we were living the life. We scratched enough money for rent, for food, and for going out and clubbing, which is all that really mattered to us when we were 25. So after that, we moved to San Diego to kind of, we were always kind of on our way to California, wanted a more progressive environment. This was 2002, so San Francisco was a ghost town. So we decided to move to a place that was a little more, I guess, laid back lifestyle after living in the city for quite some time. And established here and just started at the bottom. We went to Chamber of Commerce events and we, chatted with real estate agents and made them websites for like $250 each.
So I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to get into the website design business or industry?
Yeah, sure. So in 2001, hardware was pretty big. We just had the dot-com crash. But, we started to see this idea of a new type of address, a new type of brick and mortar, or a new type of phone number, which is the website. So, we just put all of our stock into that's going to be something that is going to become the new standard in terms of usability, in terms of the way that users' habits are. We don't want to call and wait on hold. We don't want to get in our car and drive someplace. And so we just really felt that working on the web was going to be really promising. At the same time, in my previous experience working with the different organizations I didn't really have a lot of fulfillment. I would write white papers about whether or not we should take on a new technology or software. I'd submit them and never even hear back if they took the advice. And so I kind of had this thing inside where I wanted to build stuff that I could see the fruits of my labor. And so obviously with the internet, anybody can go to a URL that we've designed and can actually design things that we use as well. So that was the primary motivation. And, even further than that, when I was growing up, I always wanted to work for ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, and be a special effects artist. And so I saw this, and if you remember back in the early 2000s, Flash was really big. And so there was WebFX is what it was called. And so that was kind of our first business model, is to be special effects for the web.
Very cool. So where have you guys grown to today? Because you're, one of the premier design houses out there, especially I would say for the Silicon Valley world. But where are you today? How big is your firm?
Yeah, today we're just short of 50 people, which I feel is almost a perfect size. We had been anywhere from 5 to 15 people for many years as we were figuring everything out, and which we still did really great work with. But we hit a growth spurt about 3 years ago and have kind of, I think, settled into that 50 employee number, which has been great.
And how did you bridge that chasm, if you will, which I referred to it as being such because it's one of the biggest pitfalls that entrepreneurs will run into, where it's no longer you and your 2 or 3 core people. You're now hiring, you're now scaling, you're now bringing a company culture into the mix. Would you say that you've been successful at that? And if so, where did you learn how to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So In terms of the basics, since we were 3 people, we've had a very, very comprehensive hiring program. And I'm very lucky to have a business consultant as a father. And so I actually don't have a choice, which is a good thing. But since, like I said, we were 3 to 5 people, we had probably a 5 to 6 interview program, personality profiles, background checks, a lot of very comprehensive stuff, skills tests to make sure that we bring the right people on board. And so we've been building that foundation of people from the beginning. We've never just hired a warm body just to get the work done or just to scale in revenue. We've learned that the hard way when we've outsourced. So that's been a challenge. When we first tried to grow, we tried to have teams in other countries, and it failed pretty miserably. And so since then, we've decided that we need everything in-house. As a result of that, the cool thing that happens is you grow organically. So we've never said we want to grow precisely by this much. We have targets, and we usually hit those targets, but it's only as fast as we can hire really, really good people. And so that's the first part of the foundation there. The second part was learning where myself and Arnold, who I mentioned earlier, where we stop scaling the business. So, we're relatively smart people, but there are way smarter people that we can bring on board. And so we're only so good at operations. We're only so good at hiring. We're only so good at sales. And so when we started to see ourselves reach a local maximum, that's when we started to bring other people in. And a key hire for us was hiring a general manager. So when we hit about 15 people, we realized we needed someone else to come in and scale the operations and be able to manage the revenue and expenses better. So we brought a GM in, and we got lucky to find someone, Lawrence Montgomery, who was on board 3 different organizations. He kind of, the same as starting in the mailroom and grew himself up to a GM and scaled companies up to $100 million. So that was an amazingly key hire, and he helped us do that. The third thing is that we put culture first. And we have a blog post on that, Can a Business Be Run by Its Culture? And we spent some time and created this thing called the Tao of DT. And the Tao of DT just defines what it is to be a member of DT. And it's somewhat reminiscent of if you've ever seen the Netflix deck or some of the other culture frameworks that are out there from MailChimp or some of the other really great culture-based companies. So we built this as something that we keep ourselves accountable to our culture. We make decisions based on our culture. We hire based on our culture. We work with clients based on our culture. And that way we can really stay true and be objective and a bigger picture of things as opposed to being subjective and opinionated based on that certain moment in time. And we make better and longer term strategic decisions.
If you could sum up your culture in one sentence, what would it be?
I would say our goal is to create significant impact on people throughout the world and have a great time doing it.
Very cool. And going back to that key hire, you mentioned Lawrence. How did you find Lawrence? Did you put up a Craigslist ad? Did you hire a recruiter? Because finding people like that is obviously critical to the success of your business. And what did you guys do to find Lawrence?
Yeah, it's a great question because it was not easy. And the first thing is to just accept that it's going to take 6 to 12 months to find the right person for a very, very key hire. Not just a GM, but whatever business you have. That key hire does not happen overnight. The second thing is what we do is we use personality profiles as we test people. So we take those profiles ourselves, pretending that we are that person. And we can see how that profile turns out, and we write the job description based on that. So in a way, we get inside the psyche of the person who may be reading it that we think may be a really good fit for it. And we write a really badass job description, not just using terms that describe that person from their profile, but also being really honest, saying what's hard about the job, saying what there's a challenge about the job, saying how much responsibility that you have, not painting a pretty picture, but also showing what the opportunity and potential is for that person too.
Which personality profile test do you guys use? Because I'm a big fan and junkie of those as well.
Yeah, we use primarily the DISC profile. Okay. Mm-hmm. We've been using StrengthsFinder as well. We use a happiness at work to measure the culture. And then we use one that kind of doesn't have a name. It measures attitudes and different aspects of a person's internal psyche. It's funny. My dad gives it to me, and I keep asking him what the name is because other people ask us, and he's like, "I don't know. I don't know. It's just what we use."
Nice.
But I could email it to you for show notes later if that helps.
Yeah, that'd be great. We've been a big fan of Colby, so we've used Colby for a lot of our stuff.
For good things.
So, okay, and you've got your feelers out there. If you're, when you're looking for a guy like Lawrence, are you using recruiters? Is it word of mouth? Are you putting things on your blog, or your website, or your Facebook, and you're just letting things come to you? Or are you guys proactively seeking this person, with ads and listings and things like that?
Yeah, so every position's different. So if it's a designer, we look in specific places. In terms of a business person, like a GM, we actually didn't name it general manager. We named it director of operations on purpose. We knew we wanted a GM, but I felt that we were going to get a lot of restaurant GMs applying to us.
Right.
And I wanted someone that would be interested in a director of operations, but be able to take on a GM role. So we used LinkedIn pretty extensively and did a lot of targeting in LinkedIn. We did both active recruiting. At this time, I couldn't afford a recruiter because it's a high salary position. So it would have cost me more than I could have. It was already a stretch for me to afford this person when we first hired him. So we did a lot of this on our own. So we did not only ads, but we did targeting. We did active recruiting by doing searches and reaching out to people through InMail. We also, I was a part of entrepreneurial organization as well as I had a lot of contacts in YPO. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to a lot of those YPO people and asked them if they had referrals. And fortunately, he ended up coming not directly from the YPO person, one of the YPO people I know, but he had worked for him and he had moved on. So we got a reference through there and were able to reach out to him that way. But it is at first a bit of a peppering a shotgun blast out there. And then as you start to get better candidates, honing in and focusing more time on the networks that deliver those candidates.
And how did you know he was the right guy? Was this a gut instinct? Was he just right on paper? A little bit of both?
On paper, he looked great because what we look for quite a bit is tenure at a job. So if some guy looks amazing, but he hops around a job every 1 to 2 years, there's a problem there. Right. And unless you want to hire someone for 1 to 2 years. And so on paper, he looked really good. He had been at, I think, 3 to 4 organizations. He had worked himself up the ranks at each one of those organizations. And each one of those companies started as a smaller company and grew bigger. So on paper, he looked great. At this time, he was kind of a last-second addition. And we had a couple candidates we were getting really close to. We weren't completely in love with them all. They were all great people, and they might have worked out just fine. But we didn't say, like, when you meet your wife, you're like, this is the one. It didn't feel like that. And Lawrence kind of came in. He was really stoic, but cool at the same time. And we wanted some of that because Arnold and I are both really nice guys. And we needed someone with a bit more of an edge. And he had that edge, but at the same time was really cool. It wasn't a boring kind of guy. So he nailed all the questions. So we had interviewed 50 people at this point in time, and he answered every single question almost at 100%. When we ask questions, we have a level playing field, and we grade the questions that are answered, and he scored top marks on all of those. So I think it was a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's a process. Hiring amazing talent is a huge challenge. So that's why I'm very much interested in that topic. So you guys have been scaling for the last couple of years. You mentioned that things really started to take off for you 2 or 3 years ago. What was the catalyst for that?
Interesting story here. So in 2010, I had moved to San Francisco. So the company was still here in San Diego. Arnold stayed in San Diego, but I moved to expand us into San Francisco. It was a great time. You could kind of feel the energy building. You could see the VC capital was coming back out to play. And it was still affordable in the city. We lived in the Mission, and we lived in a cool loft where we had a retail space downstairs. So I started building an office around that. Started making contacts. Like, I couldn't go outside without selling a deal. Walk the dog, get a coffee. It was just a great time. That's when we actually sold Hello Bar as well. And so we kind of broke on the scene with my living there. But after 2 years, and a lot of time spent there. I learned that my team didn't want to move to San Francisco. They like it in San Diego. They like the lifestyle. And what I started to notice is that I couldn't really get much done there. I was always networking. I was always meeting people. I was always sharing ideas, thinking of new ideas. When I would come back to San Diego, I could put my head down. I could be creative. And so we also started to see Google and Facebook start to really start poaching designers a lot and offering exorbitant, crazy salaries that we can never compete with. So we decided to stay in San Diego. I moved back down, and we decided to grow. We had hired Lawrence. We knew that we had a lot of contacts in San Francisco. We knew we had a lot of demand. We were selling out. Like, we only have so many spots. We're a subscription model, not a project model, and we only had so many spots at a time. We were full. So we knew it was time to grow. We knew we had a good product to sell. And that's when we set the plan in action. And I think we've been growing. We've slowed down a little bit now on purpose, but we grew 3x the next year after that. And I think double again after that. So in 2013 was 3x and 2014 was double.
Would you say that, Lewis Howes and Tim Ferris's and really endorsement or use of you guys had anything to do with that? Because that's about the time I found you, was about 2 years ago.
Yeah, those projects are not huge revenue drivers for us because they're usually for friends. Those are more our couture advertising projects,
Absolutely.
Right? So they're great partnerships. It's great exposure. It gets us into the eyes of a lot of really wonderful entrepreneurs. It opens up a lot of conversations and allows a lot of people to see our work. The work that we do for larger organizations like a New Relic, that hits a whole nother crowd. That hits the product and marketing crowd as well, and it hits the VC crowd. So we've never had much of a marketing budget. We don't do a lot of sales. So we design it into the people that we work with and how we get our name out there, and that's worked really well for us in the past.
So what makes Digital Telepathy different than anyone else out there? What makes you guys unique?
So I would say a couple things. Number one is, and we're not the only people who do this, but we've always built our own products. So since 2004, we've been building our own startups within our organization. The first reason for that is because I'm a typical entrepreneur and I can only build other people's ideas so much until I have to build my own. And the second reason for that is that we wanted to learn. We needed to step into the shoes of all of our entrepreneurs. And so the way that we work is modeled off of our experience building our own products, growing them, monetizing them, and eventually, in some cases, getting them acquired or failing miserably. There's all been great experiences for us. So as a result of that, it makes us different because we have a process that is really unique. It's made for startups. It's made for entrepreneurs. We looked at what a typical service business does and how it works, and we kind of flipped it up on its head. Instead of scoping a project up first and saying, Mike, how many pages do you want and when do you want it done by and all this kind of stuff, you don't know the answers to that stuff. You may think you do at this point, but as we start to dig into it, any smart entrepreneur pivot. They learn new things. They come up with new ideas. They learn from their users and the research that they do. They test some things. They iterate it. So we decided to just accept this instead of fight it. So we got rid of change orders. We got rid of scope creep. And we said, it just costs a set fee per month to work with us, and we're going to work the way that you work. So we're going to work in a way that's iterative. We're going to work in a way that if things change, they change. We'll roll with the punches with you. And we're going to be involved in the highs and the lows. So when something goes wrong, it goes wrong with both of us, and something goes right, we're both responsible for that as well. And so the way that we've been able to do that is by creating a unique way that we approach design, which is called objectives-based design. So instead of our goal being finishing a project, quite often you can fall into that. And it's all about the deliverables. It's all about giving the deliverables on time. To us, deliverables, who knows if those are even right? Our goal is to accomplish the objectives. So if the objectives are increasing acquisition on a website, well, that's what we go into the project with. And that may take us a month. It may take us 6 months. And learning all the research with that, running all the strategy about what's going to accomplish those things as hypotheses, and then implementing those hypotheses, testing them, measuring them, and then going back and seeing what the research tells and continuing to go through that cycle until you see that huge amount of growth. The byproduct is great design. The byproduct is a great experience. It's user-centered pleasure as opposed to just having this deliverable of X many pages with this color scheme, so on and so forth. So it's a completely different perspective on the way that we do business.
What's the biggest mistake that you see, website owners, if you will, or entrepreneurs? What's the biggest mistake that you see them make with their websites?
I think the biggest mistake is not basing everything on their user. So the only person that the site really matters to is the person on the other side, on the other screen, that's using the site. And so you really have to understand this person from the very beginning. You have to talk to them before you design anything, before you write any copy. You have to learn from these people what they're looking for. And quantitative data, as you look through, Google Analytics or event-based data, is only going to tell you so much. Funnels only tell you so much. Actually getting out there and talking to people and learning about what they're looking for and what works and what turns them on is really, really critical. The other thing is representing themselves, the company representing themselves in their true light. So you see a lot of copy is incredibly important on sites. Content is only becoming more and more important, and Google is looking towards quality content, quality design is the way that it's ranking websites now. And the best way to create quality content and design is to truly understand who you are as a company, what your culture is, why do you do this, and to be able to tell a story about that, and then how it affects the user. As opposed to going into marketing speak or making it an afterthought to just kind of get it out there and just taking, standard trends. You got a hamburger menu, you got a hello bar, you got big green buttons. Like those aren't the things that actually make a website work. Now, you can do A/B testing. You can do a lot of this stuff, and we're proponents of that. But the way that you create the foundation is really kind of taking a bit of the soul of what you do as a company and why you do it, and the soul of the customer, and merging those two together. And from there, you can start to look at what kind of experiences do you want them to have? How do you want them to understand and hear about you? And sometimes being okay if getting a no really fast. If they don't like it, get them to bounce, because you want to focus on those people that do want to do business with you. And then you can test from there and iterate from there. But testing and iterating, on button colors and copy and images aren't going to solve it unless you're just building a squeeze page for a single purpose.
What are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see business owners making when it comes to choosing a firm to design their website? Because there's a lot of options out there these days, and I would say most of them. When I say a lot of options, I mean there's a lot of very big pitfalls you can fall into, such as hiring a company, let's just say through Odesk or Elance or something. They're overseas. They'll tell you that they can do absolutely anything that you want them to do. And I've had friends do this, and they wake up the next morning or the next week, with a site that turns out, they've done for 3 other companies. They just changed a couple of the images out, and they basically templatized the entire thing. And it's broken, it's messy, it's ugly, and they've wasted a month of their time and, let's say, $3,000 to $10,000.
Right.
So, what is the process or the advice that you would give someone like myself or the others who are listening to this when it comes to choosing the right design firm?
Sure. Well, I would say you get what you pay for, but that's not really the whole story in this case. I think if something sounds too good to be true, it is. And you just go back and you think about how many of your friends said, like, hey, I got this site, it was only $3,000. It's amazing. Right? Like that pretty much never happens. So one of our main goals when we were younger is to stop being valued based on what our cost is and start being valued based on what the results are. So the advice I would give is I think there's 3 kind of stages of where you're at with your business. The first stage would be you're in total startup mode. And it would be unresponsible of you to spend a lot of money on your website. And it all depends. I mean, if the website is the only thing that's driving anything, well, you should probably stretch a little bit. But we quite often won't work with people that are at that stage, even if they're willing to spend half of their whole budget with us. That's not good. That's actually going to remove their chances of success. So I think the second stage is you're kind of in the middle and you're a little more comfortable. You've got some traction. It's time to up level. And then the third stage is that you're already successful and you're moving towards the more perfection. Are you moving up market? Are you moving into different categories of the market as well? And money is kind of no object. So I would say on the first level, it's okay to go with some of these firms, but you need to connect. You need to make sure you connect with that person, that they really understand it. Again, if they say they can do something at a crazy low rate and a crazy fast timeline, it's probably not going to be the best quality. If you talk with someone and they want to take their time and you like their process, you learn about, like, you ask them in their past projects and you say, how did you approach this? How did you come up with these concepts? And if they can't answer those questions, they probably templatized the website. But if they can and you like to answer those questions, then that's probably a good fit for you. In the medium level there, when you've gained some traction, what I would say is don't be afraid to slow down a little bit. Quite often, probably half the time people come to us, they're always on extreme deadlines. And those deadlines almost always get pushed by the client, not even us, if we agree to move on those timelines, just because it's just too hard to keep those up. So if you slow down a little bit and you make the right choice on someone to work with, and again, it's not just based on their process like in the first stage, it's more based on their credibility. What have they done before? Who have they worked with that has actually changed that company? So a lot of people have come to work with us because we were on board with New Relic early on through their IPO. And so we were by no means responsible for their success, but we were part of it. And so that's a great story for us to tell, and it's a great story for other organizations to come to us and want to learn from and want to have a similar experience for that as well. And then the third stage is if you're this established organization, you want to move into different categories and things like that as well. You need to find someone that's a long-term partner you want to work for years. So that's all about camaraderie. That's about seeing eye to eye. That's someone who understands your business, that can grow with your business. They've got the depth in the team. So in our case, we can support, multi-million-dollar projects, but there's a ceiling for what we can do. We've got 50 people. And we're smart enough not to say, okay, we'll take on one client and everybody works for that client, because that would be the death of us. So we can only work on so big of projects. And so you want to really look deep into the bench of that team, and also in the different capabilities of that team. You want them to be able to grow with you. So you don't want just to be great at UI design. You want them to be great at user experience. You want them to be good at analytics, content creation. They don't have to, I wouldn't say you have to merge in marketing like social media or SEO, because you do want to stay really specialized, but you do want to make sure they have that depth.
Great advice. And y'all's process is extensive. And, I remember going through it. It's basically an interview for me, where I had to fill out my bio, a lot of very personal stuff that was not necessarily business related, which was really interesting and very cool.
Yeah, when we created that interview, our goal was, we knew that some people wouldn't move forward with us, but it takes a long time. We ask a lot. So our goal is that you understand a little more of what you need now. And so if you end up taking it, we're like, take that interview and give it to other people and get other bids on things as well. And hopefully your time wasn't wasted.
Very good. Now, transitioning just a little bit here, what are your personal goals next in the next 3 to 5 years of your life? And this could be on a business level, on a personal level. What is really important to you right now?
So I've been spending a ton of my time developing culture. I think culture is the number one strategy for any business. I think everything has to start with culture. If you have a churn and burn company, you might be able to reach some revenue really quickly. You might be able to get rich, but you're gonna hurt a lot of people along the way. And something just clicked for me. I spent some time with Tony Hsieh a while ago, and we all know that he's a huge part of culture. And all of a sudden, after talking to him for a little bit, it just clicked. It's like, oh my God, why am I not focusing on this first? When I first started the company, I read, all the big business books. And it was people as resources, operational management, and all this kind of good stuff. And I never understood why, when I would use those strategies, I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be. And then once I started kind of being more true to myself, the way that I treat my friends and family, I just accept the people I spend 10 hours a day with as the same. That's when things really started taking off for us. And so I'm really, really passionate about building that culture within our team, and then sharing as much as we possibly can with the rest of the entrepreneurial world. So we let people come into our office anytime they have lunch with us. I spend a lot of time in my day just talking to other entrepreneurs about culture and try to encourage them to do that. I'm planning on writing a book here in the next year. So that'll be really fun. I've never done that before. about finding your culture within your company, because it's there. You don't make it up. It's actually inside the people that are in your company. That's your culture.
Consciously so or not.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. You got to wake it up. The other thing is that we're taking on a new line and a new perspective on design, something we're really, really excited about, and that's experience design. So we're moving from web design. The quote that I've been using internally is that we want to go from designing great websites to designing great experiences. And I'm making a big bet on this. And I think it's a pretty safe bet, because some of the most successful companies in the world are experience design companies. Four Seasons, Virgin, Disney, Apple. They design experiences. Apple doesn't design just great hardware. I mean, they're designing it for an experience with a really strong why behind what they do. The Four Seasons is all about experience. So there are tens of thousands of great companies out there with incredibly smart people that don't know how to do that. They don't know how to design those touch points in the human experience. And if you kind of take those together, with culture, we're designing the experience of our team so that our performance can be better and so that we enjoy our lives better at work. We call it our life's work instead of our work life. When you get into experience design for other companies, you're designing those experiences for all of their customers. And so a huge goal of ours is creating, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, creating significant impact on different people in the world and having a great time doing it. So that's the merging of those two things. If we can start designing experiences, not just on the web, not just in mobile apps, but in the physical world, in events, within teams, service design, things like that as well, we feel like we can impact a lot more people.
Two questions for you. On culture, what was the most impactful book for you that you would suggest people read? I know Tony has Delivering Happiness. Is that the key one, or is there another that you would point people toward?
Delivering Happiness is great. I think we got a lot of ideas with that. What Delivering Happiness does, it just gives you a different paradigm. It shifts your perspective on the way you look at your employees and the way that you work. Zappos is a very different company. We don't mirror much of what they do, because it's just different. We have different staff. We have different goals and things like that as well. I think the best book to read and to start with is Tribal Leadership. Tribal Leadership is, and it was actually recommended by Tony, and Tribal Leadership is the most powerful book that we've read, and it's shifting the mindset of your team from going from I, which is the way that we grew up. In school, we wanted to score the best test, and in sports, we wanted to win the race. And that's the way that we are in business too. We're driven by ego, and that's the way I had been for the longest time. It's like I always had to be the best. I had to be better than all of my employees at everything and better than all of my competitors. And I spent a lot of time doing that. And there's a quote in that book that we have as a seal that you walk across when you walk in and out of the office that says, I am because we are. And it shifts that perspective to I'm great, from I'm great to we're great. And so we've spent a lot of time digging into this book. Our whole staff has read it. It's required reading before you even get a job at DT. We have a meeting twice a month where it's an open meeting in the middle of the office about culture and tribal leadership. We go through the scores. Like there's a 1 through 5 score basis of how your team is doing, 4 being kind of the ideal score. And we talk about it openly. So that's been a very profound book for us.
Perfect. Thank you. And the second question was, can you give an example of experience design or experience-based design?
Yeah, I actually have one of my favorite examples is from the Four Seasons. So there was a family vacationing at one of their resorts, and I think the little girl had left her stuffed animal, her very favorite stuffed animal, behind. And she was distraught, and the parents, could barely settle her down, and called Four Seasons, or maybe they called them first and said, hey, we found it, but don't worry, we're going to work this out for you. The parents were like, what are you talking about? Just send it back. And so they overnighted it, but it came with all of these photos. And the photos were of the stuffed animal being by the pool, getting a massage with sunglasses on. It was, being the lifeguard. It was, probably 12 different scenarios throughout the place there, and just giving a nice excuse for what the stuffed animal was up to. they didn't have to do that. They could have just sent it back. It was great that they found it in the first place. Another quick example of them, I guess their doors have to click in a certain way so that you feel secure when you're in your room. And if that door doesn't click in that way, they're up there immediately fixing that door, making sure it makes that sound to click. So those are really, really small experiences. But in general, what experience design is giving your customers the experience of your brand promise. So if you
how do you translate that into a website, which is really what I'm after here? Like, what is an example of? Yeah.
So a little more detail on this. You think of your website visitor or your user. You think of the journey that they go on. So there's multiple stages to the journey, from awareness that you have a problem or an opportunity. So you may have all of a sudden you may have pain, and you may go on the internet and search what that pain is, or whatever that may be. That's the awareness. You have consideration when you land on someone's website and you're looking around that website and deciding whether or not this is a good fit for you. You have acquisition when you decide to stop being anonymous and signing up to either sign up for an account or sign up on an email list or whatever that may be. Give me more information, call me back, something like that. You have activation when you actually take an action, right? So you decide that you're going to drop the code for something, and you're going to go to a seminar, whatever that is. You have a purchase, and then you have referral, and you have retention. So those are the 7 stages we look in the user journey. And each one of those stages, you can map the experiences of the user. So you think of it, this is a person just like any of us. You think about where they're at. So if they have pain, they may be scared. They may be looking for an answer. And you can actually design the touch points of the experience when they're in the consideration phase on your site to be calm, to be calming, to show credibility, to all these things. And that comes through the colors you use. It comes through the information you share right up front. It comes through not asking for anything, maybe just gifting that information to them and having them dig deeper to see if you can work. So it's creating that confidence in the person as well. And so there are thousands of touch points that a person has throughout their journey. And what we do is we map all those touch points, maybe not all of them if there's thousands, and then we can prioritize which ones make the greatest impact on the user and start to design those. So it's a whole different way of looking at an interface. Usually you say, okay, here's the header image, here's the navigation, here's the body copy and the footer. And we think more of these touch points of the different aspects of what they're looking for to accomplish their objective. In terms of specific examples, with Lewis's site, or with, I guess a better example would be the Lean Startup website. We originally worked before the Eric had released the book, and we knew that it was people coming in from a movement. This was a blog post, and there was this amazing movement behind the Lean Startup. And so we didn't want to talk about the book first. We wanted to talk about the movement. We wanted to give resources. We wanted to connect with the person. We knew that they were probably starting a company or trying to scale their company. So we gave them all of that information that they were looking for first. And then we led them on a trail to the book as kind of the final chapter of the website and what you can do and how, the way you can take action from this and continue the story as well. So each one of those pages, we did a 1-page site to start out with. As you scroll down, kind of funnels you into that action that you can take at the end.
One of the most overlooked pieces of the web design process that I've discovered over the last couple of years is the fact that, I basically look at you guys like artists or engineers or architects, and you have to work with what you're provided, from your client, which in most cases is, photography. And I think that is probably an overlooked area for business owners. Do you find that that's the case, where a client comes on and you're like, okay, well, what are the photographs of your product or your service or whatever it may be, and they don't really have anything that works? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, sometimes the assets are the things that hold us back the most. In some cases, they're the greatest attributes that a client has. We have a client at venture.com that have the most epic photographs. Like, they give National Geographic a run for their money, which makes our design way easier. So, but in the case of where there's a challenge, we try to be as creative as possible, and we have those conversations before we engage. So quite often we'll say, if it's a product-based, if they're selling product itself, we'll ask them, what do you have? Let us see it. And we'll look at it and we'll try to be honest up front to say either these need to be reshot, or we'll try to come up with an alternative way to do these. So we'll do illustrations if it's not necessarily product based. A lot of the time we're describing processes, and we need to make sure up front that we're able to create either an animation or a video or parallaxing that kind of describes what that process is, so that we don't have to rely on those assets themselves. But it is quite difficult, and I think that any client that is a customer of some of these products, I think they start to realize how important photography and copy and all the assets are as well.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. That's something that I would highly recommend to all of you guys out there. Step number one, if you have a business right now, the quickest and fastest way that you can stand out from the crowd in your market is to go get some professional photo shoots done. And that provides, guys like Digital Telepathy and Chuck here with the assets that they need to really make you shine and stand out. So huge piece of the puzzle there. So Chuck, we've got about 5-10 minutes left here. Bringing it full circle, what would be some of the biggest pieces of advice or lessons learned that you could share with our listeners here today when it comes to either business and or personal life? What have you found that works really well for you on a personal level that has allowed you or supported you to achieve what you've achieved so far?
Oh, wow. Okay, where to start? I think, I'm like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a proud bootstrapper. As a result of that, it's a long game. And so, we're in a place where we're really happy with where we're at right now, but it took a really long time to get here. It took 10 years. It's the story of the Beatles, where they had to play alehouses in Germany before they really struck it big. It took them 10 years as well. I'm not comparing myself to the Beatles, but anyway, I wouldn't expect overnight success. So the first thing is to be okay with, not moving fast, to be okay with a longer pace, a longer tail in what you're approaching with your business. What I found when we've done that is we have this rock solid foundation. We're not shaky. The last recession that happened, we actually were fine as a result of that. Whereas the previous ones, it was a bit of a challenge. But because we've built these relationships, we've built this process, we're not selling more than we can actually be capable of. I think that's really, really helpful. The other one is to start with culture. I think that if you are a company of one, you need to have a culture. And you have a culture that probably almost always blends with your personal values and your business values. They are different, but they have to be related. You're not two different people. And so I think it's really important that there is a blending in your lifestyle and your business, that you don't have two different lives, and that your values are similar as well. So starting with one person, I would write down your values. I'd write down what your vision or your noble cause is. Noble cause is something referenced from tribal leadership, which is your highest aspiration as a business. What do you want to accomplish? And that's not revenue. That's like, what do you want to accomplish in the world? Microsoft's example is a PC on every desk, which is kind of amazing that was accomplished. So I think that culture as foundation is incredibly important, and that using that to grow. Quite often people have great culture and then they decide to grow too fast and the culture gets vaporized. And so I think you need to use that culture to grow as well. The other thing I think is use common sense. A lot of the things that we've created are just common sense. Why do we have a subscription and why do we do objectives-based design? It's because it works best for the people that we like to work with. We like to work with entrepreneurs and startups. And we chose them because it's exciting. They're not afraid to take risks. Things move fast. When we work with very large brands, there's tons of bureaucracy, red tape, everything's delayed. They're actually the worst at paying. So we choose who we like to work with based on our culture, based on our personal values. And again, to start out with, that might not be the biggest ticket, but it grows over time. It creates that foundation. And then wrap your services or your product around those people, the people that you want to support as well. So when we go into the office every day, when we weren't doing this, it was a crapshoot. We're like, every single time a problem would happen, we're like, what do we do? We gotta have a meeting. We gotta figure out what to do. And now we've been able, as a result of the culture and the common sense we use, we know what to do. When something comes up, we know what the next steps are. It's almost a nice binary situation as opposed to a crapshoot in itself. So that's been really, really helpful. And then I think as you gain traction, as you grow a little bit, every year I try to kind of up-level what we're trying to accomplish. And I really believe that growth and money and success comes as a result of doing great things. So I would say try to focus on doing those great things. And not great things that are opportunistic, not like, oh, I see a need for this in the marketplace. If you don't care about that need, don't do it. Find the things that you really are passionate about, that you really do care about, because there'll be opportunities there. And when you do that, you're your own sustainable resource. You can weather the bad times, the hard times, and you enjoy the good times even more. And your work is that much more meaningful to you.
Awesome. Truly a lot of wisdom in that advice and those words. So thank you so much. Chuck, where can people go to learn more about you personally if they want to connect with you, and or obviously Digital Telepathy? And we'll clearly be putting some links in the show notes here to all of those resources. But where would you like people to go to check you guys out?
Yeah, so for me, I'm DT Chuck on Twitter. Probably should be more active, but you can find me there and you can chat with me there. For Digital Telepathy, we are dtelepathy.com. And we've been putting a lot of effort into our blog, so I recommend signing up for our email list for the blog. We only send one post a week. We put a lot of energy and effort into that post. And as a result of that, I think it's pretty good content. And then, as I mentioned, we're always building our own products. So our next product is about to come out of beta. And if anybody tweets me, I'll give you an invite. It's filament.io. And we've built an intuitive analytics system for content. So our goal is to kind of support better content, better design on the web. So we've taken Google Analytics and a bit of our own special sauce. And we've taken on the goal of getting rid of these vanity metrics like page views and visitors and different of the kind of typical aspects, and put them into more meaningful analytics of understanding engagement. How many people are engaged? What type of people are engaged? Is it Twitter or Facebook more engaged on a certain blog post? How far are they reading the post? Are they reading all the way to the bottom? And then what should you continue to write about? So that product's just getting started. It's pretty exciting. It's a beautiful product. So if you want to give that a try, just tweet me and I'll give you an invite.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And this has been an unbelievably valuable session. I'd have to say it's one of my favorites so far here at Self-Made Man. So thank you so much for your time and for your contribution. And I am truly grateful.
Hey, it's my pleasure. And I'm grateful to be on the show. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Chuck.